pipe ceremony. The pipe ceremony is an important ritual of sharing and gathering. It is often conducted at the opening of an event, a meeting, a negotiation, or a gathering. According to the tradition, the ritual's purpose is to ask for guidance in projects, protect the well-being of individuals and the community. Tobacco misuse. While tobacco is sacred, the non-traditional use of tobacco, with its high content of nicotine, is addictive and harmful. Aboriginal elders maintain that this type of use is disrespectful of the spiritual, medicinal, and traditional use of tobacco.
The Powhatan people loved tobacco. The English said, "Let me get a hit of that," and, like most first-time smokers, found it quite nasty. They weren't total strangers to tobacco. Tobacco was sold in England, but it was imported from Spain's colonies and had a sweeter taste than Powhatan swag. When John Rolfe landed in Jamestown aboard the Patience, he was carrying a bunch of tobacco seeds he had swiped from the Caribbean. When he planted them in the damp Virginia soil, they grew into thick, meaty tobacco leaves. Rolfe sent some back to England, where people said it reminded him of that gas from Spain. From now on, Jamestown would be the plug. Everything changed after this. It wouldn't be digging for gold that made the settlers money. It would be digging tobacco farms. We saw John Smith try to bring farming to Jamestown earlier, but that had mixed results. His rule of "he who does not work does not eat" was tough to enforce. There were still plenty of lazy bones perfectly happy to let others do the work. They needed a better system, and the English already had one. Private property. The colonies started a new policy. Anyone who comes to Jamestown could buy a plot of land and keep the profits they make from it. The more tobacco you grow, the more money you make. This turned tobacco into the 1600s version of Bitcoin, a get-rich commodity, with the only difference being that tobacco is an actual commodity. The entire Jamestown economy would become based on tobacco, to the point where it literally acted as currency. Coming to Jamestown from England to set up a tobacco operation is easier said than done. You need money for the trip across the ocean, and the tools to farm. Who had that type of money? You guessed it, people with money. It's like today when people say, just open a business or buy real estate.
In this program, I will be sharing with you those same simple real estate investment tips my rich dad shared with me years ago.
Oh, thanks. I'll do that with all the money I have. And Jamestown was already awash with hoity-toity gentlemen who owned land back in England. Now the colony was inviting more of them in? Are they going to do the work? Do we not remember the starving time when people literally died rather than learn how to plant some corn? Someone was going to have to work, and it ain't going to be them. It just so happened that back in England at the time, the streets and highways were filling up with beggars and homeless people. They were treated back then the same way they are today, ignored, abused, treated as an inconvenienced, blamed for their own misfortune, and criminalized. Many of them had been working on the same farms for generations until rich landlords took the land out from under them and evicted them. Boy, I'm sure glad that doesn't happen anymore.
A massively powerful landlord sued to evict hundreds of tenants across the country. The landlord had bought up billions of dollars of real estate at low prices during the pandemic. This landlord is starting to kick people out of their homes.
The respectable classes of England saw homelessness as a personal moral failing. They were just lazy, or crazy, or addicted to alcohol. They needed to learn the value of hard work. I'm sure glad lazy rich people don't lecture us about the value of hard work anymore.
Most of you are lazy. In fact, I'd say basically all of you are lazy. You don't understand what work is. You don't understand what work ethic is. You don't understand the ethos of conquer Earth. You don't have fire blood. You don't wake up to go piss at 3:32 a.m. and go, I'm not going back to sleep because I want to make some fucking money. So you're all lazy. When I sit here as the richest person who's ever fucking wasted his time talking to your fucking dumbass and tells you what to do, you don't fucking listen to me.
Breathe air!
In fact, some of the original founders of the Virginia Company thought a colony could provide useful job training for England's beggars, so they could pull themselves up by their bootstraps just like the rich people did. Coming to America to learn skills helps them while getting them off the streets of England, where they were a real buzzkill for all the landlords who had made them homeless in the first place.
You are a brokey.
It was a win-win, but they never actually got around to bringing in any poor people. They didn't want to pay to bring beggars across the ocean, and they didn't want beggars bugging the hard-working residents of Jamestown while they were busy doing cannibalism. But now that they had moved on from cannibalism to tobacco, it seemed like the right time to finally import some poor people. The tobacco growers happily paid for their trip across the ocean. In return, the poor people had to work on tobacco plantations for a set period of time, usually between 4 or 7 years, at which point they would have a chance to own land of their own on which they can grow tobacco themselves. These people would be called indentured servants. You might understand why someone who was down on their luck in England would agree to move to a whole different continent in hopes of owning land one day. After all, there was really no hope of owning land back in England. Men rushed into Jamestown to claim or work on tobacco land. Women came to find upwardly mobile husbands and start families. By the year 1670, the English population exploded to 41,000. People started moving beyond Jamestown, making Jamestown just one city among many in a sprawling system of plantations called Virginia. But the numbers don't paint the entire picture. Tobacco planting is intensive. It exhausts the soil after a few seasons, causing planters to expand into new land. Planters brought their pigs and horses from Europe too, letting them run free like the indulgent parents they were. Pigs especially were destructive because they ate and had sex with everything in sight. One island became so overrun with pigs only after a few generations it became known as Hog Island. It was common for Native Americans to return to an area to find everything they had planted the previous season devoured by pigs. But now we see the dynamics behind what made the conflict between the Native Americans and the English so destructive. The English had an insatiable need for land that lay within hunting and planting grounds Native Americans had used for generations. Without access to these grounds, Native Americans literally had no way to sustain themselves. For them, it was a matter of life or death. The English presence, so small and almost comical in 1607, grew into something huge and ominous by 1670. No matter how many English died of war, disease, or starvation, more of them kept arriving in ships. More of them were being born. More of their pigs and horses and sheep filled up the landscape, throwing off the delicate ecosystem Native Americans had built and relied on for thousands of years. As Native Americans died of war and disease at much higher rates, there was no King James, no City of London, no England behind them to replace the people they lost.
The population of Native Americans in 1492 was 140 million people. In 1600, it was 15 million people. That's 125 million directly dead. But it's not because it's 5 generations. It's 108 years. 5 generations. That's 20 years for a generation. That means there's all these women making babies during that time period. So to drop the population by 125 million, you probably have to kill 175 million people. Because you got to kill the babies too.
So the Native Americans resisted with everything they had. They learned how to use guns. They acquired guns through trade or theft. They made alliances with each other or other Europeans when they got the chance. It didn't matter. No matter how many English they killed, there would be more boats dropping off more people to replace them. Pocahontas saw firsthand just how crowded England was. She knew there was an inexhaustible supply of humanity they could draw on to keep the fight going forever. Some Native Americans saw the handwriting on the wall and tried to make peace with the English. They made deals where they promised to live on their little patch of land in exchange for being left alone, but they were rarely left alone. The pigs would show up to eat their crops. The deer and birds they hunted disappeared. When they left their little patch of land to find new hunting, Europeans accused them of breaking their agreements. You must remain in your little open-air prison. Failure to do so will be used as an excuse to dispossess and murder you. What unfolded in Virginia in the 1600s would be repeated over and over again in English colonies up and down the East Coast. New England, New York, the Carolinas, they all have similar stories. Europeans decided over and over again that the continent wasn't big enough for these two competing ways of life. It would get even worse after the US won independence, when the vibrant, dynamic young country expanded into the wilderness, a wilderness where other human beings had been living for thousands of years. That didn't matter. It was manifest destiny. And some Native Americans accepted this destiny. Just let me live on my little patch of land and leave me be. The young, dynamic country of destiny was gracious enough to reserve land for this purpose. Reservations. Just don't wander off this reservation to hunt or find water. Don't leave your open-air prison, or else we will be forced to dispossess and murder you. Maybe we can call this settler colonialism, maybe imperialism, maybe ethnic cleansing, maybe genocide. Whatever it is, it's one of the engines of American history. An engine that was primed in Jamestown in the 1600s. This is not me running a woke guilt trip on Americans. I'm American. I'm white. My own life is built on these layers of history. I don't expect for me or anyone else to vacate this land and return it to its original inhabitants. I don't even expect people to partake in performative land acknowledgements.
First, I acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
I would prefer a regular acknowledgement. I would prefer recognition that what we know for a fact happened actually happened and call it by what it was. We haven't even reached that point as a country yet.
But in truth, it was unoccupied wilderness. What they don't emphasize in school is that white settlers were very often slaughtered by Indians for building a small cabin many, many miles from the nearest Indian village. And yet somehow we're supposed to see the white settlers as the bad guys in that scenario. It is one of the great triumphs of all time that our forefathers had to first conquer an ocean in order to then land on a giant mass of uncharted wilderness filled with untold dangers and wild beasts, and yes, primitive warring tribes, many of whom practiced human sacrifice and cannibalism. And yet in the face of those unimaginable horrors, our forefathers and ancestors conquered this entire hemisphere and settled it and single-handedly dragged it out of the Stone Age and built from the wilderness the greatest civilization the world had ever known. Am I proud of that? Yes, I am.
Our unwavering support for Israel proves this. I don't think our support is a function of just geopolitics or foreign lobbying or corruption. At its core, our support is admission that the Israel Project is a 20th century spin-off of the American project born in the 17th century at Jamestown. It has a similar pattern of settlement, massacre, open-air prisons, and the inevitable resistance these things engender.
Europeans come to this continent, literally ethnically cleanse the indigenous population out of existence, kill them on a scale that has hardly been equaled, and refer to them as savages. That's an achievement. Who's the savage? The first time I encountered this was in a little town in Massachusetts called Deerfield. It's a reconstruction of what that little town looked like in colonial America. And in front of each house is a plaque that explains something about this house. And then description. On the 18th of October of 1702, the savages attacked. The first time I saw this, the savages. You come in here, destroy everything these people have, and they are the savages. That's an interesting move.
אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם, ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
You will witness how Jews go to Gaza and Arabs disappear from Gaza.
תראו רבותיי, לפי עניות דעתי, לפי מה שאני מבין במקורות שלנו, עם הפראים האלה לא היה שלום, אין שלום ולא יהיה שלום. לא שאני לא רוצה שלום, גם אני רוצה שלום. ארץ זה שייכת אך ורק לעם ישראל, וכל עזה וכל לבנון, כל זה צריכים לשאוף לנקות את הארץ מרוכבי הגמלים.
Sometimes people refer to Israel-Palestine as a complicated issue. It's an attempt to muddy the waters. Like the massacre of the Native Americans, Israel-Palestine isn't complicated.
So it's not a complex issue. That's the big thing. It's super simple. There's one group that has enormous power. It's the most powerful country in the Middle East. It's backed by the United States. It acts on another population of people with total impunity and is never held accountable for anything. So there's no symmetry in the relationship, period. And if we know that if somehow a population of Jewish refugees ended up in West Bank and Gaza, and an Arabic government in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv had an open-air prison in what, Jewish Gaza, which they bombed with white phosphorus. They killed civilians indiscriminately, and they had no provisions for medicine. They had an embargo that blocked food, that electricity wasn't running, that there was an over 48% unemployment rate, life expectancy, malnutrition statistics were horrifying. One of the major policymakers in this hypothetical Arabic Palestinian state said, we need to put those Jews on a diet. In the West Bank, there was another Jewish area where there was a little bit more autonomy, but there was regular Arabic settlements where they pulled up the Jewish farmers' foods, they terrorized them with rocks, the security forces broke children's bones, and they couldn't drive their own roads. We'd all have no problem understanding what that was. So there's nothing complex about it. It's a pure asymmetry relationship. And the question is rights or not. So that's it. It's not complicated.
A group of people, sponsored first by Britain and then by the United States, settled on land where other people were already living and used brute force to evict, murder, and erase those people. If we can't even acknowledge what's happening in Palestine in 2025 for what it is when we see it on our screens every day, how are we ready to accept what happened in American history when we can only read about it in books?